Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us at Be Women Weekly Dialogues, our webinars to share, learn on impact and leadership, and to get inspired to real action. I'm Laura Giadorou, Koch, founder of Be Women and passionate about the B Corp movement. And those who know me personally, I do live and breathe using business as a force for good. So before we say, I will start with a few words about who are we, Be Women. So we are a global network of women entrepreneurs that seek to balance purpose and profits in the markets towards economies of care, of value, of collaboration for all of us, people and planet. In the next 50 minutes, you will be absolutely inspired with our guest speaker, Suzanne Biegel, CEO of a Catalyst at Large. I have known Suzanne for several years now. She is absolutely amazing, inspiring advisor, connector, creative thinker, and philanthropist, entrepreneur, activist, and she gets things done. And the most interesting thing is that she has been a pioneer for 17 years in gender lens, not only as a practitioner, but also a researcher in the Wharton School. And so she works today, her work is centered on catalyzing investors to move more capital with a gender lens. So she is one of the big experts. So we are so lucky to have her here today to share the wisdom about the impact investment on gender lens. And before we get started, I want to share something very special about Be Women, our empowering move. So that when you are listening to this webinar, you can feel empowered, not only in your mind, but in your body. So put your shoulders up, chin up, make your eyes twinkle with joy and determination, and with a wide smile, illuminate everybody around you. And Suzanne, please share what is a gender lens and what are the challenges, what's happening in this amazing field, especially in the last 2 years. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I'm so delighted to be part of this Be Women community, newly part of it, and to be on with you. So thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to speak as an investor myself. I'm going to speak as a past entrepreneur. And I'm going to speak as someone who's been involved with the Bee movement for quite some time. But also all of my consulting and my field work, my research and my field building is around really moving more capital, more strategically, with more impact and more velocity to positively affect women and girls, and therefore to positively affect the planet. And all the things you just said, Laura, about a more caring economy, a more collaborative economy, really that this is not about one business, it's not about one investment, it's about the entire shift that we want to see in the financial system is really where my passion is, and using finance as a tool for social change. So I'm going to share my screen, it's okay, and feel free to be typing your questions in the chat window. Laura and I are going to keep this as informal as we can, and I'm going to just give you a little bit of perspective about what's really happening in this space, and but then really interested to hear what you're doing and what you're excited about. So first, I want to just again tell you a little bit about me and my orientation to this. But then I want to really give you a sense about what's going on in the world of gender lens, gender smart investing. I want to talk a little bit about the intersection with B Corps, because that's a reason why we've come together. I also know that for Be Women for 2020, the two major agendas are very much about climate and sustainability and about gender equality. And I've been working on really bringing together the climate and gender nexus. And so I think these things are not separate. I think they're together. And I want to talk a little bit about why. I also want to cover a little bit about just sort of get into some of the things I was thinking about in talking to Laura about as Be Women, with your energy and passion and commitment and connectivity, to say where are you making your difference around this, and whether it's in a geographic context or a thematic context or a particular domain of business and investment, just to think about where the opportunities are for people to really get engaged And I'm so interested to hear what other people are doing. So that's what I thought we would go to together. I started as a mainstream tech entrepreneur, but I was doing ed tech. And I built and sold a business in the 90s and was with a woman founder who I joined. And we grew that business so well, in part because I believe, because of our leadership as women, but also because of the diversity of the team that we brought together, and the culture and the caring and the commitment that we had around building a values-aligned business. We sold it to a multinational who really valued us for that. And then for the last 20 years, I've been investing in businesses that I think are world-changing. And I was lucky enough to fall into a crowd with the founders of Ben & Jerry's and Patagonia and The Body Shop, all people involved with the B community. And they really influenced the trajectory of all of the rest of my work and my private investing, but also the businesses that I've been involved in. So I also produce a summit called the Gender Smart Investing Summit, which happens every 18 months. And I'll tell you a little bit about some of the other things that I do as we go through. So Laura asked me to cover a little bit about what is gender smart investing and how has it changed in the past 2 years. And so I thought I would just give you a little bit of a world tour around that. And again, if you have questions, just jot them down. Or feel free to put them in the chat window, and Laura will keep me connected to that. So the first is, what are we talking about when we talk about gender lens or gender smart investing? And people call it different things. Some people will say it's about investing in women, or they'll talk about investing in women's economic empowerment, or they'll talk about investing in aging, but with a focus on women, or they'll talk about how do we really improve the lives of adolescent girls in poverty? So they may be coming from different places. The idea here is to talk about where we intentionally incorporate gender-based factors, a good gender analysis into investment decisions to get not only to better business outcomes, but also to better social and environmental outcomes and to better financial outcomes. So those social outcomes and those business outcomes can be across whether you're really looking to improve your supply chain. It could be about the products and services. It could be about a better customer intimacy. But it's always going to be thinking about where is this really going to improve the business, and then where is it really going to improve, in my case, impact investing with a gender lens, solving for whatever social issues that we really are going for. So I want to unpack that a little bit and talk about what does this mean when we talk about lenses. So, and this may be familiar to some of you, and for some of you it might be newer. So one is, when people talk about this, they may be talking about what's the gender balance of the founder team, and who is the ownership team. So it could be that it's a woman-led, or it could be women co-founded when people talk about this. When we're talking about leadership, it may not be that the business was founded by a woman, but it could be that the leadership team is significantly gender balanced or significant women's leadership. Workplace equity is when it may not be either about who owns it or even who leads it, but where is it that the policies, the practices, the leadership is really gender balanced and gender equitable throughout the whole business, and both internally and externally. And so it could really be that it is about how does this business run? And I think B Corps especially think about how is a business run as much as what does it make? The value chain picture could be that, and you just mentioned it, one of the people on the call, who is producing the products? Who is distributing the products? So again, it could be male or female led, but if the real impact of the business is where are women in that picture around the value chain, then that also counts. And there are people who are gender lens investors who would say, yeah, I'm invested in a male-led company, but the real impact, and I'm in a company called Aduna, which is based in the UK, which is producing nutritional products and teas and nutritional bars. It's started by 2 guys, but it's 1,000 women in the supply chain in West Africa who are producing baobab and moringa and cacao. And that's where the real impact of the business is happening. So it's a value chain picture. And then finally, products and services at this top line. So it might be that it's really about product that might be very gendered female product, or it could be that it's not inherently gendered female, but where they're really improving women's lives through these products. And it could be that it's about a product that is obviously something like access to reproductive health or access to something to do with femtech, or it could be something that is much more neutral, like energy access or water access, but where there's a disproportionate impact from women as customers. There are a couple of other lenses that I would bring onto this, which is there are some people who approach gender lens investing as addressing urgent human rights or social justice issues that disproportionately affect women and girls. So again, girls' education, or slavery and trafficking in the garment industry, or again, lack of access to family planning. So that could be the angle that an impact investor is coming in on. Or even this one on the right, companies that are out there to dismantle structural gender inequality. So this is where can we be really transformative with our investment to say, are there places where women have been traditionally left out or really undervalued? And that might be in an area like construction or engineering, or an area which is typically where the higher paid jobs are for men and the lower paid jobs are for women, in tech, for example. And where can we as investors really use our leverage to really change the game and say, if I'm investing in this business, it's because I really believe it's going to transform women's roles and lives and economic opportunity. And then finally, another lens that you can use is to think about where are we as women as investors. So whether that is private investors or whether that's institutional investors, where are women in the driver's seat making decisions? And that people may immediately think about big investors, but it's also where are women at any part of the investment sphere able to, whether they have, as my friend Tracy Gray, who is a private equity fund manager in Los Angeles would say, whether you have a piggy bank or you own a bank, whether you have $5 or $50 million, whether you are wake up every day and this is what you do for a living, or whether this is something that is just part of your own wealth building and how you want to use your resources, that women should all be leaning in as investors and should all get to be gender lens investors as an opportunity. So that's a little bit of an overview when we're talking about gender lens investing. What does that mean? The purpose, you could say, what is the purpose of all of this anyway? At the end of the day, we really believe that there are social and economic dividends from paying attention to these factors. And it's about building more inclusive and sustainable local economies at the end of the day. But we really believe that there are, by paying attention to gender, market dividends, because you understand your market more and you're tapping into markets. Liz Corrado, who's on the call, talked about looking at older women as a market force and really understanding what are the needs of older women, whether that's healthcare, whether that's travel, whether that's housing, whatever, financial services, whatever it might be. That understanding your market better is going to get you a dividend. That paying attention to women as innovators, as leaders, as customers, as employees, and supply chain is really a talent dividend. And then the innovation dividend, really, that having more women as product designers, as scientists, as people coming up with the solutions, that by paying attention to where women are, we're going to have an innovation dividend, because women are going to spot opportunities and they're going to think about things a different way. And that if we're not tapping into that innovation source, we're like, as Warren Buffett would say, we're operating with one hand tied behind our back to solve the great problems that we're really aiming to solve. And where does finance and investment come in? As investors, we can play a very active role in really realizing these things. So these are just some of the things that we just talk about. And I think people who are really good gender lens investors think about both the risk side and the opportunity side of what does it mean to really pay attention to these. And of course, from a social impact standpoint, it's also essential that we're thinking about what are the risks in society, gender-based violence and lack of access to financial inclusion, lack of access to technology inclusion that we're really seeing across society, that we can really address through how we behave as investors and business people by paying attention to this. So this can show up in every asset class, in every domain within the investment sphere. Sometimes people think when they hear gender lens investing that it's only about investing in women entrepreneurs, or it's only about investing in microfinance, or they have their own view about what this might be. And this slide, which was put together by Calvert Impact Capital, which is one of the leaders in gender lens investing, is just to show people that whether and how, whatever kind of capital you have to deploy, and whether it's more on the impact side of the spectrum, more on the commercial side of the spectrum, that there is a place where you can find gender lens investing opportunities. So I'm not going to take people through it, but I could actually go through every one of these boxes and say, if I have this kind of capital to deploy, what are my options today to invest, that there are things out there. Now, if you're coming from a sustainable development goals point of view, and you're not leading with, well, what kind of capital do I have, but really, what are the problems, the social and environmental problems I want to solve, which is how I know a lot of people in the B community are thinking. You can start with gender equality as your SDG, or you can really be starting at any, the thing about gender is, it's the SDG that crosses over all the SDGs. So you can be starting with good health, or you can be starting with decent work and economic growth, and then gender is there. And so I think one of the things that people get stuck on sometimes is say, well, I'm not a gender lens investor, I'm really all about access to water and sanitation, or I'm all about climate change. And the reality is that there are women in that picture across every aspect of those themes. So we can talk more about that. So I want to give you a few facts and figures about what has happened in the investment space over the last couple of years. And Laura, you asked me before the call, why do I think that there is growth happening in this sector? Because you're going to see that there's been tremendous growth in the gender lens investing arena. It's not even a sector, it's really just a way of looking at the market. So before I get into the facts and figures, I want to say there are a few reasons why I think the market is really shifting. And one of it is about the Women's March and Trump being elected. I know we're sort of left, right, potentially left, right, and center on this call. The tremendous outpouring of frustration around Me Too and Time's Up, and the movement building that is going on, that has caused people to wake up and say, not only from an activist standpoint and a political standpoint, but also what can we do with business and investment around these issues? And so that's one. The second is on the level of the SDGs. The SDGs coming into full force, and SDG 5 being named and framed as a thing, and people just adopting the SDGs has really brought more attention to thinking about women's empowerment, women's economic equality, things around the pay gap, things around women in leadership, women on boards. These things are all coming together. And then the data and the research that has come out in the last couple of years about the correlation between well-run businesses, positive economic performance, and where women are in the picture. So I think all of those things have come together to say now is a moment. And we've been building this. I've been investing like this for 20 years. The first gender lens investment funds were in 70s and 80s. And so this is not completely new, but really in the last couple of years, after all this time I've been working on it, and a whole group of people in the field have been working on it, it's been this tremendous growth. And I think Suzanne is on the call. We have a group called Women in Social Finance that a few of us on the call are part of. We've started in 2011, and we are very much about also collaborating to grow the field, and collaborating to grow the field of more women in power and investment, whether they're sustainability focused or social impact focused or climate focused, but also how do we really bring this forward in terms of a broader diversity agenda. So that's the backdrop that I'll share. So in terms of if you want to actually invest today and in public markets, what does that look like? Well, coming all the way back to 1993 was the first public markets vehicle that was a gender lens vehicle. And it was, where are women on the board and where are women in the C-suite? Now fast forward to 2018, and now we're about to come out with the 2019 numbers. There are more than 33 options that are out there across big banks like UBS and Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, Legal and General, all the way through to real innovators that had not shown up on the scene. A new vehicle from YWCA, which is really tying investing with a gender lens to also taking some of the profits and feeding it back to women's issues that YWCA is working on. And so the growth of the market has really been explosive in just the number of vehicles. In terms of money coming in, there's two ways to think about public markets gender lens investing. One is, where is there a fund that has a gender lens mandate? So these are named vehicles that have an explicit gender agenda. And if you just look at those, you get to about 2.4 billion in 2018, and our new research is going to show that it's far surpassed those kind of numbers for 2019. There's another way to look at it, which is asking any asset managers, asset owners, do you use gender as a factor of consideration as part of ESG investing, environmental social governance, in your investment analysis? And that number is well over $1 trillion. And so you can say, is it 2.4 billion or is it over $1 trillion? It depends on how you want to look at it. And I think what I love about the B community is that it's very intentional. It's very much saying, what are we measuring? What are we committing to? How are we really executing? And so I tend to look at the smaller number is the people that are very intentional and really measuring it. And the larger number is people who would lightly say, I think about gender as a factor. So that's what's going on in public markets. So there's real growth. That also means that there's more opportunity for people to call their banker, call their financial person, or go online and find a product that they can be in. And what are they looking at when they're building these products? And I think this is in a public company's context. We'll talk also about private companies, but they're looking at the kinds of things that I was mentioning before. They're looking at women in leadership, so that might be governance, who's on the board, who's in the C-suite, who's in the senior management. They might be looking at what are the policies and practices around pay equity, around flexible working, around access to abortion and contraception in a healthcare plan, and around anything that makes that business better for women, but correspondingly better for men and women to work for. Then they could be looking at a product services lens, although mostly in public markets, gender lens investing products, they don't do a product service analysis. So they don't give credit to a company that is really excellent products for women because it's data that hasn't been easily tracked and analyzed in a consistent way across a universe of companies. So most of the public markets funds are looking at women in leadership and policies and practices. Where I would love to see it go is also to add in a product service analysis, add in a supply chain analysis of where are women really being affected in the supply chain, and then a marketing analysis of, is that company respectful to women and men? Is that company reinforcing gender stereotypes, or is it really respecting a vision of men and women that we want to see in the world? And then community engagement is not also in these public markets vehicles really something that's analyzed, but in the B Corp world, of course, how are you as a community citizen? How are you really engaging with all your stakeholders is absolutely critical. So these are the kinds of things that you could think of as a B Corp. Where are we on these things, and where can we get better? But from a public market standpoint, these products, again, have really focused just on the top two. So I want to switch gears and talk about private market vehicles. So you might be investing in public markets, but you might also be investing in private equity, venture capital, private debt vehicles, structured vehicles that are enabling capital to flow. And I've been tracking this for a couple of years now with Wharton Business School, Wharton Social Impact Initiative, and writing a report. So our first report was back in 2017. We came out with a second one in 2019, and now our 2020 report will be out by April. And again, our assets under management, the first report was just around $1 billion that had moved in with an explicit gender lens into these vehicles. By last year, it was up to 2.2 billion, and now I have no doubt that it's going to be well over 3 in the next one. But we're looking at where are their gender lens funds, but also where are women venture partners? Where are women on investment committees? Where are women as investors into the funds as limited partners? And there's tremendously different statistics in this universe compared to the broad-based universe where in the venture capital industry overall, we're talking about, depending on whose data you're looking at, between 8 and 15% of venture partners are women. And it matters by country, it matters by size of fund, et cetera. Investment committees are by and large significantly male, and the amount of capital flowing to women is 3% or less from venture to women entrepreneurs, and 0.2% to women of color entrepreneurs. So the data in these funds is completely different than the broader marketplace. So when we ask these funds what they're doing, we ask, when you say you have a gender lens, what does that even mean? And they define it very differently. So some will say it means that we're backing women founders or co-founders. Some will say that we're looking at where are women in leadership. Some will say we actually really care about women, where women have a place on the cap table that's significant. So even if she was the founder, has she, as an investor, can I prioritize making sure that she still has a significant ownership stake in her own company? Some people say it's not about the founder, it's really about where are women and girls as target markets or in the supply chain. And then others are really saying, look, just prioritizing on gender is not enough. I want to really look at racial and ethnic and other forms of diversity. And I really want to think about the broader picture that lifting sort of white, rich women up as fund managers may not be, for some impact investors, their goal, that they really want to use an intersectional lens. So we ask all these questions and we publish a report. These are just some examples of the really extraordinary funds that are in this the last report, which is 87 funds. And you can download this off the website from Wharton if you're interested. I'm happy to send you a link. But I'm really excited about the growth of these funds, and more than half of these funds are new funds from new fund managers. And we could have a whole conversation around just this generation of new fund managers that are coming in. They might have left a fund that was a fund that wasn't particularly great on gender and said, I can try to affect the mainstream funds that are out there, or I can go start my own. Or they might have come in because they were working in the field and they said, I know a lot about healthcare, I know a lot about sustainable fashion, or I know a lot about food or technology, and I'm going to start my own fund. So that's a little bit about what's happening on the fund side. Laura asked me to talk a little bit about what's new, what's really, really new in the field. And I just want to give a couple of examples of things I'm excited about. One is this thing called the 2X Challenge. And there are, in 2018, 7 DFIs, development finance institutions, which are the investment banks of governments, came together to the G7 DFIs and said, we feel like there's been such underinvestment in women that we want to create a challenge for ourselves and for the rest of the investment industry. And we're going to put $3 billion on the table, a challenge to put $3 billion to women by the end of 2020. And they are now more than $2.5 billion deployed. And they have a whole different set, those kind of lenses that I talked about. They have a diverse set of lenses and metrics that they look at. And that's really galvanizing a lot of attention in the marketplace, especially with the co-investors that those development finance institutions invest in emerging markets. So when you put a challenge on the table and you say, we're going to do this and we're going to measure it and we're going to really be rigorous about it and report back on it, it can really have this catalyzing effect. Totally different example. In the UK, Suzanne, who's on the call here, has been working on this for so long, and I had not seen a gender lens fund, a dedicated gender lens fund, in the whole time that we've been looking at this work until the last couple of years. And so this latest one is called the Women in Safe Homes Fund, and this is about investing in real estate and property that is for women that are from marginalized communities, domestic violence survivors, and others, and then also investing in the nonprofit organizations that are running those properties to help them be stronger in knowing how to really run those as businesses and manage those properties effectively. And so if somebody is a impact gender lens investor in the UK that's thinking about that population, now there's a vehicle that people can invest in. And I think what I'm excited about is the creativity of not just saying, I'm going to launch a fund to invest in women entrepreneurs, which is super important, but the precision around in what domain, for what problem are you trying to solve, with what kind of capital, and what's innovative about it. The Equality Fund is a vehicle that the Canadian government seed funded this past year with $300 million, and another $100 million has been raised so far to invest in a gender lens vehicle, which then would also be a kind of permanent capital vehicle for grant making towards the women's movement, and really thinking about civil society, women's rights, and economic justice organizations. And what's groundbreaking about that is that the management team, the leadership team on that Equality Fund is made up of people from all these different communities, not just the professional investment world, but the investment, philanthropy, public sector, and civil society, and the women's rights groups themselves are in the leadership team of the Equality Fund, which I think is a very, very different kind of model. So their tagline is funding feminist futures. I really encourage you to think about what's going on there. Financing for Moms initiative. Another example I wanted to give, this is Merck, the pharmaceutical company. Merck Foundation is called Merck for Mothers, which has been doing grant making in child and maternal health, came together with OPIC, which is the US Development Finance Institution, and Credit Suisse, major Swiss bank, to create a $50 million initiative to invest in child and maternal health in sub-Saharan Africa. And so I think this is an example of another one of these kinds of partnerships of allies that hadn't come together before to say, how do we do gender lens investing using what the kind of capital and the kind of knowledge and expertise that each of us brings to really do something new. And then finally, Criterion Institute, my last example here, is exploring this question with a global community to say, how do we use finance as a tool to address gender-based violence? Something that people don't automatically think I can use investment and finance as a tool to tackle. And so that's a whole initiative we could spend an hour talking about, but I encourage you to look at Criterion Institute's work. I want to switch gears and just say there are a lot of issues in the field that are conscious, and there are a lot of issues in the field that are unconscious. And I know as B Women, you have all experienced both the conscious and the unconscious barriers to capital moving, to business, and to are really making progress in this area. So rather than talking about them individually, I'll just say that one of the things that I think it's imperative for us to do is understand the issues and the barriers and the opportunities and solutions so that we can really come together to bring what we each have to the picture and really say, what is it that I'm doing? What is it that you're doing where we can work together on these kinds of solutions? And that's sort of a good lead-in, I think, to talking about where B Corps come in. But Laura, I'm going to pause here and see if we should switch gears and ask and take questions, or if we should just keep going.
Thank you for asking. I think that we can maybe ask one question that we have in the line is that maybe you remember this in 2016 that PAC's Elevate Global Women Index really addressed the issue of a gender pay gap to Apple. And then they asked them to audit and address this issue. And they did actually with this. So basically this gender lens investing, this gender lens movement is actually like activism of creating gender equality. If you can mention how is this playing out in the last few years with the gender lens activism, that is it really moving forward things from the investment point. And we have also the same example with BlackRock that has for the last 3 years sent these letters that they are really moving towards impact investment. But is it happening? Does this activism really getting to make profound changes? What is your view on this?
Thank you for asking that. I think that there are a whole group of investors, myself included, that really believe that in addition to where we're moving our capital to the good actors, that we need to use our voices as activists for the actors that we really believe need to make change. And that is whether it is from a policy standpoint, getting involved too, so that 5 years ago, if you said people would need to report on the pay gap, people would have said that's never going to happen. It's, companies are not going to do it. There's no responsibility that they have to report. And now, because the UK pay gap laws were passed, there's legislation, and now that's going to a lot of other places. Now companies over 250 people have to report. So we took something where people said there's no way that we could get that data to now there is, which then creates the opportunity for somebody like an activist investor like Natasha Lamb from Arjuna Capital, or Lisa Hales from Boston Common, or Matt Patsky from Trillium, to really lead shareholder engagement campaigns and to be engaging in the boardroom and say to specific companies, where are you around the board, around leadership, around pay gap, around a whole set of policies and practices. I still think it's very early days. I think As You Sow, which is a group in the United States, and Share Action, which is a group in the UK, are leaders in this, in organizing investors, but it's still very early, and I feel like this is like a untapped potential amongst women and men to rise up and use their voice as active shareholders, and also to look to our fund managers and our asset managers to say, how are you voting my proxies? How are you voting? And I'm not going to accept anymore that you just say, well, it's a commingled fund. I can't vote on your issues while I have somebody else's capital who has a different view on your issues. It's not our fiduciary responsibility. I think people are really realizing that that's just not going to be good enough anymore. So I had a call with a very active woman gender lens investor yesterday, who just had gotten off a shareholder call with a major bank, asking them in the US, they have a global policy, they have a national policy around providing access to healthcare and abortion services and contraception. And now that they're state by state, that women's rights are under attack, they were asking this major bank, will you still cover travel if a woman needs to get an abortion to another place, just like you would cover travel for a transplant or travel for cancer care. And how really digging in and saying healthcare for women is a women's right, but it's a human right, and it's a business imperative. What are you doing about it? So I'm amazed by how out there some of these women are, and men, on these issues. But I think it's like an untapped thing that we are just scraping the surface here.
Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating. I mean, what you just said is really very and right on the core on what is this movement. And we have McKinsey has published several reports by now where they say, yeah, diversity, inclusion are actually showing that the companies are much better run if they have all these elements, and they predict that if a lot more weight is given to gender equality, by 2025 we will have $28 trillion more globally, just because we are focusing on gender lens investing, gender lens equality, and gender lens activities. That is a little bit what Be Women is trying to really focus on. So what is your comment about this shift that this movement that you kind of pioneered is doing to the global economy? What are your opinion? What's going to happen?
Well, I think people, thank you. I think people are waking up and realizing here in the UK, the Rose report came out and said, it's $250 billion of impact on the UK economy if we just back women entrepreneurs at the level that we're backing male entrepreneurs. And so instead of it, I think early days, people were saying it's just unjust, it's just wrong, it's just unfair. And now people are saying, wow, we're just really missing the boat from an economic and business and financial opportunity standpoint by not paying attention to this. Now, the fact that we have the data we have a lot more data than we had, but we still are missing a lot of data. In some places in Europe, for example, it's illegal to be capturing sex disaggregated data on lending, which was ironically supposed to be protecting people from race, class, and gender bias and discrimination. But now it means that we don't have the data that we need. In some places we do have the data, but we don't have the action. And so what's exciting to me is that people are now launching big initiatives to say, if this is the target and this is something we know, then we've really got to mobilize business and pension funds and investors and public policy to do something different. And that means that we also have to do the work on making sure that we have enough businesses in the pipeline, that women are also ready to ask for that capital, to put that capital to use. And that we also shouldn't make the assumption that the old models, classic venture capital, classic straight debt, classic private equity, are necessarily the right structures and formats for what we need going forward. And so I'm also really excited that people are innovating on product. And I spoke to a woman fund manager in San Diego who's she just raised $100 million to invest in women-led businesses, but also businesses led by people of color, veterans, and people with traditionally more other barriers to access, indigenous communities, with a revenue participation structure rather than a classic debt or equity structure. And I think it's because she really understands the kind of capital needs that people have. And I think that's what's exciting to me, is that there's product innovation happening on the investment side, and yet it's all just going too slowly. I think we need just as much as we have a climate crisis and people are really waking up and saying that's all, the solutions are all moving too slowly, we have a crisis on the gender side where we know a lot of the right things to do, but we have still got to align the investors, the entrepreneurs, the public policy, all of the pieces of the puzzle so that we really unlock a lot more capital. And I will say another example is, pension funds who say, oh, we can't possibly invest this way because it must be, that's kind of a social impact thing, it's not really business, or it's not in our fiduciary duty to pay attention to something like gender factors. We might be, missing, decreasing our financial opportunity. And we have to reframe this and say to people, no, this is about de-risking. This is about increasing opportunity. This is the smartest thing you could be doing. And that this isn't about a fiduciary duty risk. This is about being a better investor. And with that, we just have to get that story out much, much more.
Excellent. We have a question from Daniela Koch. What we will do now is, if you don't mind, finishing the presentation and talk about B Corp, and then Daniela will jump in with her questions in person. Is that okay? Because we have maybe 10-15 minutes left on the call.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So I think that in the B community, one thing that is out there is that B Corps that are women-led or women impact could make themselves more visible as a group. Because I talk to funds and investors who say, I really care about social and environmental impact. I want to be in the better companies, but I want to know what B Corps are out there. And so I think that's one thing. Is my question is, how do we make it easier for investors to most easily find B Corps with a strong, again, could be gender leadership, could be gender balanced leadership, could be impact in terms of supply chains or products or customers. That's one thing that's been on my mind. I think the other is that there are funds that are investing primarily in B Corps and responsible businesses that are gender leaders, but there are others that really aren't. And so how do we reverse influence those funds or influence them as LPs in those funds to say, gender is something that we really care a lot about. And if you could be in a business that didn't start with a positive gender impact, but use your leverage as an investor to really be there, we have to educate the fund managers about what these opportunities really look like. And I think B Corps can play an active role with their investors in educating them about what this opportunity really looks like. And I think that's connected to this question of really investors and companies working together to really say, we believe that paying more attention to gender in a more serious way in our business will really have a good outcome. It's part of running a good business and really looking at the B factors. Can you help me? As an entrepreneur, saying to a fund manager or investor, can you help me do this? But also for the investors to really go and say, this is an explicit thing. I believe, just as paying attention to good labor practices overall, or good environmental footprint, or good practices around how a business is run as much as what it makes, to really double down on the gender side. Laura, you said to me, and I really believe this, where are investors with a gender lens, because people are putting capital out there, able to say gender is really important, but also all the other elements that B Corps really represent is important, and let's get more of the businesses that we're investing in with a gender lens also to become B Corps, because it makes the whole community stronger. And then the last thing is, on the B Impact metrics side, I've been looking at this over the years. I feel like we can do a better job of reporting on gender and telling the story about what does really paying attention to where women are in the picture, or where women and men are in the picture in an integrated way, really tell an even more powerful story about the value of gender balance and the value of B Corps, and why B Corps are the way forward. So these are just some of the things that I've been thinking about. And I really would love to know what people from within the community think about that. Laura, I know we have time to do that after we finish my quote unquote presentation, but I wanted to just put some of those things out there. A few more things I wanted to cover. As I mentioned, climate and gender is on the mind of so many of us, and so many people in the B community. And people say to me, what does it even mean to bring climate and gender together? And so I just wanted to give, for those of you that are not as deeply in this conversation as I am, the perspective that we're talking about, which is that it can be about where are women founders and leaders leading companies that are generating climate solutions. So that could be in food, it could be in fashion, it could be in the built environment, it could be in energy, it could be in water, it could be in agriculture and land use. So where is it that women are playing a leadership and ownership role in businesses that are really tackling climate issues? And the obvious ones are the kinds of ones that I talked about. But if you've read Project Drawdown, which is Paul Hawken and his team, you'll also know that out of the 80 most important things that we could do to tackle climate change and get carbon out of the atmosphere, out of those 80, 6 and 7 are access to family planning and access to girls' education. So we have a longer conversation about it, but it's also really thinking about where are women leading companies that are about things like that. The second category is where are women scientists, where are women coming up with innovative solutions, product designers that are really coming up with the solutions around climate, whether that is my friend Andy Kleisner, who has a business which is about doing solar-powered refrigeration for emerging markets, and solar-powered televisions and solar-powered appliances of all kinds, or whether that is somebody who's doing the new kind of biofuels or the new kind of climate-smart agriculture solutions that we need. On the products and services side, it could be that it's somebody really either designing, developing, manufacturing, selling, again, climate-smart solutions across any of those areas. Or it could really be a lens around where are the green jobs being created. And as we talk about a Green New Deal, as we talk about the great opportunity for green job creation, are women in that picture, or are they going to get left out of that picture? And are women of color in that picture? And what does a just transition really look like around the job creation opportunity? And then finally, another view is in the supply chain. And really, where are we getting women farmers in Africa access to climate smart solutions, inputs and training and finance, so that they can be the architects of the solutions around climate as much as anybody else. And I think that's another lens where we bring these things together. So I'd love to see this be a huge thing taken up within the B community, is to be thinking about climate and gender together, and that investing in women is one of the smartest things that we can do to unlock solutions to the climate crisis. Also, just thinking about where women are as leaders in business and finance, paying attention to environmental sustainability and climate disproportionately compared to men. So I wanted to leave you with a couple of things around where can you make your difference. You could be growing and creating new funds and new vehicles. You can be backing funds that already exist. You could be growing new ones. You could be working to enlist new investors and new sources of capital amongst the communities that you represent, whether that's philanthropy or public sector capital or private family offices or institutional capital, wherever you are. And I know some of you are doing that. You can be educating, informing, and inspiring people in the community and in the investment world and the business world around what these opportunities really are. We need a lot more media and amplification around what these solutions really look like, and they need to be not pink and soft and small. They need to be solid and business and impact and really telling powerful stories that inspire people. I think the opportunity to really have commitments and partnerships, as I've seen so much within the B community, that really galvanize change. And then, of course, influencing public policy, which I know some of you really do, around what needs to shift around gender. And then really working to up our game in existing businesses and up our game in existing investment vehicles. And finally, ensuring who gets a seat at the table. So who is in a position that wouldn't normally get to be at the table in an investment conversation or where investment decisions are being made. And whether that is young people, whether that is Indigenous people, whether that is Black and Brown people, and people who have not been in an investment role, but rather in a women's rights role, for example. What are we doing to educate and invite a much bigger diversity of voices so that as we really reinvent the business and the finance system and the economy, that this is equitable and really helps us create the world that we're all seeking. So that's just a few ideas and challenges that I would put out to the group. I am so excited to know about what you're all working on together and separately so that we can connect more dots. And I'm happy to be in touch with people to hear about that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we have Daniela Koch who wants to make a question, and she's really very much into environment and gender lens. So Daniela, you unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think you answered my question at the very end almost, but just to be precise, I wanted to ask how to break this traditional investment focus. For example, and to be precise, on Monday, we have the big challenge to convince a financial group here in Denmark, in Copenhagen, about why is it important to invest in Amazonic communities. And now that you mentioned the aspect of the gender lens, you have just answered my doubt. Because, for example, this CEO was mentioning, well, we might be interested on an initiative about planting trees, but talking with experts about the Amazonic region, they said it's not only about that. I mean, it goes beyond. It's so complex. It's social issues. You have to think about supporting biocommerce, encouraging and empowering women to study, young generations not to migrate, but to stay in the rainforest, to protect the resources so that logging and other exploitation activities are not happening anymore, because indigenous communities now more than ever are completely committed on preserving it, but on the other hand they are also being criminalized for doing it, right? So they need our support from our world to be either investing on it in terms of energy efficiency, as you mentioned, education, and bringing their products and selling them in our markets here so that they get this income and they therefore work sustainably and self-sufficiently. So
Right.
Do you have any specific key, any language, probably any term, concept? Because I'm new in the business sector, I'm new in the investment sector. Actually, that's not my main talent. I'm a public speaker. I come from Galapagos. I have been working in tourism. And then now I am here in Denmark just 9 months, and I have this big challenge and big opportunity as well to convince these companies, big companies that have the commitment to invest in sustainable aspects. But the question is how to direct them to the right investment, right? So that is not only for looking nice and green, but also to be efficient in this money being injected for a productive and smart, gender smart, in this case, investment.
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's so great to hear about you and what you're doing. And I think things like agroforestry and really connecting the dots between keeping trees standing and really being stewards of the land and thinking about where are the productive products that could be there, where that could be involving women and communities, indigenous communities, is one. I think the linkages between, believe it or not, the pharmaceutical, of course, the pharmaceutical industry and the value of biodiversity and the solutions that are coming from nature. I think the companies like Unilever and others like Ben & Jerry's that are committed to buying rainforest products and really seeing where are we sourcing our nuts or our cacao or our coffee or whatever might be in these kinds of places. So thinking about where does a Unilever show up in this conversation, or a Natura? So whether you're investing in a public company and asking about its supply chain, whether you're investing in Nature Vest, which is connected to the Nature Conservancy, has an investment fund, which is about connecting conservation and biodiversity and land to real investable opportunities, and thinking about where are women in that picture. So there are sometimes it's not as easy to find the investment opportunities. You can't go to one website and just check it out. But what you can do is say, what are the attributes that we care about? And who are the other investors that are investing in this direction? And I think what's exciting is that a lot of environmental investors are starting to say, we've got to really be thinking about the communities, not just the, it's so important to talk about the planet, but it's also as essential to be talking about the communities who are the stewards and who are in those places.
Thank you. That was really great. What about, there's another question here about, you are really a researcher and a practitioner, for the last 15 years. What are the most exciting, what do you see the most exciting thing that is happening with the future of impact investment, and where do you see the new generations going?
Okay, so what am I most excited about? Believe it or not, I'm coming back to, I don't know if Liz Corrado is still on the call, I think you are, coming out around things like investing in solutions around menopause, investing in solutions around women's mental health, around, by the way, women and men's mental health, investing in things which are around the lack of affordable housing and how it disproportionately affects women and families, and increasingly what the crisis is going to be for older women who have less savings and who are living longer and who potentially don't have housing ownership. So taking some of these areas and getting more granular and really saying it's time for us to be thinking about where are the investable solutions around those things. That's part of what excites me, is the going from a sort of broad-based conversation to getting more specific. At the same time, I'm concerned that and we've had this conversation, a few of us, that there isn't enough money for the research and development of new funds, new vehicles, helping for example, new women fund managers get off the ground, or impact fund managers get off the ground with enough runway and backing to be able to experiment, to innovate, to take the time to build pipeline and to really raise the kind of capital that they need. And so we need some more things for incubation and for support in those early periods, as has happened in other domains, like in the early tech space. We put so much money into Silicon Valley in the 1960s, 1970s that was, for example, public money. Now we have multi-trillion-dollar industries around tech, but it was seed funded for quite a long time. didn't just happen because you had a few guys innovating in a garage. And so where are the solutions today to give us that freedom and that potential to innovate? So I'm both excited, but I'm also concerned that we don't have enough of that necessarily yet. And then for the next generation of investors, this is part of what really excites me, is not only are they coming out and they're doing Extinction Rebellion and they're doing their activism around 350.org, but they're also really saying investment has to look different. And they're saying, I don't want what my father has, although there's some very progressive fathers, from 50 years ago as an investment. I want to understand where's the social and environmental impact of my investments. And by the way, I want that in my pension fund. I want, if I'm working for a company and my company is putting my money into a pension fund, I want an option that is a much more, an option that looks much more like the world that I want to see. And I don't want to just be given, these are your 5 choices and just shut up. This is what you can have. That people are actually saying, people in their 20s and 30s, for example, that's just not good enough. And so that's why I'm excited, is of course, it's not only the job of people in their 20s and 30s and teens to solve this problem. We need to be working together, but that energy, that enthusiasm, that creativity, and that passion and commitment around environmental responsibility and social responsibility is part of what's going to get us out of this mess.
Wow, that was really inspiring. So we are at the hour, and we'd love to hear some closing words from you, and then we'll do some announcements and some other little things for Be Women. But Suzanne, please.
Thank you. Well, I think I'm seeing Gail Wong on the call. We have people on the call from Latin America to Singapore to the US to the UK to Switzerland. And people who are entrepreneurs, who are investors, who are intermediaries, and who are business people from large and small. And I think that my mission is to see that everyone sees how they can engage on this, that this is the work of all of us. It's the opportunity that we all have, that it is in a time, especially when there are a lot of things that could be bringing us down. Whether it's the political situation, the climate crisis, the threat of war, all of the things that are going on the planet. This is what gives me hope, is the people in this community and this diversity of talent and skill and resources, and to go away and think about what can you do, and what if you're already doing a lot, what can you do to step it up for yourself, for your organization, and for the field, and to be agents of change as you all are around this. So that's my closing to all of you.
Well, it really falls in exactly of what Be Women is all about. Is about purpose and action. Mm-hmm. So what is everybody on the line and who will hear this recording, what is your call to action after you heard these very inspiring words from Suzanne? And so I would really recommend you to get a pen, a piece of paper, and write for the next 30 seconds, what is it that you're going to do to change the world regarding a gender lens? What is it that who are you going to share the recording of this call? What are you going to do? What else would you like? Would you actually want to talk in these webinars about a subject that you are passionate about? So we're all open to hear what you have to say in a few minutes. Just for a question of housekeeping, we have a few other webinars that are coming up that are really about purpose and action. And the next one will be on January 21st. The title is The Imaginal Selves, that we are all Be Women, and as we call ourselves, and the Golden Rule and the SDGs. It's by Kim Pullman, co-founder and chair of the Reboot the Future. It's going to be a very interesting call about how important the Golden Rule is to revamp what we're doing regarding the SDGs. The next one, January 30th, another radically innovative tool for our society. This call is titled Driving Financial Growth and Human Evolution Beyond Male-Made Tools. It's really about a rally call to action for women to become explorers, pioneers, entrepreneurs, and ignite that next step towards human liberation and evolution that we very much needed, the concept of care economy, collaborative economy, and respect economy. So we have other few coming up also on February the 4th, SDG Action Manager, that is the new tool B-Lab and UN Global Compact have put together for the last 3 years, an amazing tool for metrics. You know, Be Women is all about metrics. We, at the end of the year, we always come up with metrics of what we have accomplished as a group of women. And this one is one of them that is going to be an amazing way of helping the whole world, the whole market to understand how are they doing regarding the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Then we have, as Suzanne mentioned, the importance of gender bias or unconscious bias. And so we have Priscila Zamora and Baby Calvimontes also will be talking about this in Spanish on February the 6th. February 11th, we're going to talk about an incredibly interesting subject that is how do governments change the market towards a more caring, a more triple bottom line economy. Very simple, through a procurement of buying from companies that are triple bottom line. And so in Mendoza is one of the few cities in the world that has put forward this law, and they have created, and Francisco Pasquale, Noel, Soledad Noel, and Constance Connolly have written a book about how this is being implemented in Mendoza. And it's really an amazing subject, because if the government will help us move forward triple bottom line, that's a win for everybody, isn't it? And we have other few calls coming up in February and March. And we have also Daniela Koch that is on the line, will talk about sustainable tourism, a very important topic. And we have also Hecho por Nosotros, Adriana Marini will talk about sustainable fashion. All these subjects were mentioned by you, Suzanne. So on this call, I think that I really would like to now close this recording, but anybody who can stay on and keep discussing this subject, we are more than open to stay on the line and to keep the dialogue going. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for making the time.